right, now we're live. I
Yeah.
think. There we
Oh
go.
man,
Boom. All right. Yeah, it
let's
didn't.
rise the charm.
Yeah, that was me. That was my fault, folks. Okay, RPG with DBJ. Thank you very much for joining me. I have a host here.
Hello.
Absolutely. Sorry, we were preambling for like the eighth time about Invisible Sun, just so you guys can all you guys out there can get a LinkedIn, join in the chat. Of course, we're talking about travel plans today, but I just wanted to. One part I wanted to bring up about Invisible Sun was I really want to find out about this new way of thinking about gaming when you're not at the table. Well, that part of the
What I found out about it is that it's not really well thought through. It's basically like you can meet with the GM to talk about the game.
Mhm.
That's basically just it.
Oh,
And you have an app where you can communicate with the other members of the group.
that's fine. I didn't know
It's not
whether.
nothing spectacular.
Oh, see, I was hoping it would be some kind of like mechanical gaming system that was
Maybe it
that
is.
wasn't right, but that wasn't an app that was just like, hey, let's draw some cards and talk about the game over pizza. I thought it would be a little bit more involved in that. Not saying
it's basically that. As far as I found out about it, I was interested in it too, because I'm always like, hey, new things, and I want to find out and include them in my stuff, and didn't trigger me too interested, to be honest.
Right. And the other thing I wanted to find out about is I think I'm not sure if it exists now, but I remember in the development of the game, there was this idea of of course it's called Invisible Suns, and you, depending on the color of the sun, would be based on what the group, how the group dynamic would play out. I got the impression I'm just making this up. This is not true in the game, but like a black sun would be horror, a blue sun would be like investigation. I don't know.
These suns are basically it's a bit of a complicated system because the suns represent different worlds.
Right.
And each world has different color and different emotions associated with it. So you could focus specific stories on for specific suns.
Correct. And like I said, I'm not sure if this still exists, but from what I understood, that if your gaming group played under a specific sun, that you could receive further like adventure hooks and such, flavored for the sun that your group is playing under. And so therefore, if I'm just say there were 12 suns, there would be 12 different things available on a periodic basis to enhance your game under the particular sun that you picked. So, for example, there would be like player aids or like adventure hooks or things for those who are into horror, and they would be under one particular sun, whereas those who want high action, Indiana Jones styled pulp adventure would get something else. Now, I don't know if that still exists, but from that's something that drew my attention when it was first being under the development phase.
What this reminds me of is this Japanese-based RPG. Oh man, I'm really bad with names.
Okay.
I think as it was based on that you can choose a specific avatar for the GM, which is a dragon of a different color, and depending on which dragon you choose, the game is differently colored, and the GM has to use different rules. So you can basically adjust the difficulty and the flavor of the campaign based on which dragon the GM chooses at the start of the game.
Oh wow, that's different. Matter of fact, you know what? Since we're talking about this, and this, strangely enough, this does have to do with travel plans. There are. I know we're talking about travel. yes, I get distracted from things, but this actually brings up a good point. There are very few games that do this, but the ones that do try to come at it from a different angle. Like you're mentioning about this Japanese game, there are games like Rifts or Torg where the actual setting changes. The players all play a player character, but depending on where they go in the world, and I say world very loosely, depending on where they go in the world, the rules change for them. They don't change themselves. So, for example, like in Torg, there's this idea of these other worlds or dimensions that move into Earth, and the rules of those other games. Ryutama.
Yeah, I just wrote it down.
Okay,
I found out
Ryutama.
what it's
Yeah.
called.
It's a very. I like the idea of, like you were saying, about picking different dragons, and the dragons would change the rules that you abide by. Just like in Torg, I believe, like in Africa, it became it was an excuse to play different genres of games. Okay, so for example, in Africa, it became like prehistoric. So you had like an Indiana Jones go after the treasure pulp action kind of feel, and then in East Asia, it was like dark. Was it like samurai kind of ninjas or something? In France, it was the cyber papacy. It was like cybernetics and cyberpunk mixed with like this religious like dogma that was like oppressive and everything. It was, and there were all these in the United States. I think it was, oh man, was it like a dream world?
It's interesting that you mentioned this, because I think when you travel, you could always change a bit the genre you're playing based on the places you visit.
Yes.
Even if you don't change the rules, you could make one village maybe haunted, and then you play a horror story, and the next one is really silly, and make something comedic with it. And you could try to get out of the fatigue of the normal game by just changing the environment or changing the NPCs you are using while playing. So you could try out different things and see what your players really enjoy most.
Yeah, and in Torg, they actually there was a benefit to playing into the. I see the chat. There was a benefit to playing into the tropes of that style. So, for example, like if you were playing in, let's say, pulp action. If you're playing in the pulp action, like you would get bonuses for, being very athletic, jumping and swinging and swimming and hanging off of things. Whereas, like say in the horror version of it, you got benefits for running from things, kind of, and hiding. I mean, there was actual mechanical benefits and penalties for doing particular things wherever you went. Now, you could get out of hand if you tried to do that in your own game. That could kind of get out of hand, but
I think it depends. If you take 5e, for example, the most obvious thing you can give out to your players is inspiration. And if you're playing in a horror segment, you could maybe say, if you are acting like a horror protagonist and trying to hide and find more out about the monster or whatever, you get inspiration instead of the typical just roleplay a bit and that's it.
Yep.
And just say it like that. If this segment is more about this, so you get inspiration for that.
They're in a chat talking about pronouncing squirrel in Japanese.
Risu.
Risu. I wonder if there's any difference with Japanese squirrels than the squirrels.
I think they have really big ones, or what? No. It's the American ones which are really big.
Yeah, they're gray
in
and
Europe
fat.
they are a bit smaller. I just saw a squirrel outside, for real.
Really? Yeah. Talk about squirrels. There was I went to the Caribbean, and it's funny how, like, when we think of nature, like, there's so many people that are like, we don't want to harm nature, and nature should be the way it is and leave it alone. But human beings, since the beginning of time, have always brought with them or affected nature in different ways. And I say that because um, when settlers found some of the islands, like, they brought with them certain things. Like, for example, we know about Australia, and they brought a ton of rabbits to Australia because the rabbits were on sailing ships. And in Grand Turk, they have donkeys that roam around like pigeons. Like, no one owns them. They just roll around the island, just wander around randomly, and they're just in the streets. They go across lawns. And Deadman says, and rats. Yeah, rats were brought along on sailing ships, and now it's just a part of the environment. In Grand Turk, they were mining for salt, and when the miners were done, they just let the donkeys go because they didn't need to use them anymore. And then it's just a thing, right? Like, no one's going out of their way to grab them all up. No one owns them. I'm not sure if anyone feeds them. I think they just graze, but they're just everywhere. I mean, and it's cool as a visitor, but I'm pretty sure if you live there, like, yes, you can get used to it, but if you're new and you're just like, why is there a donkey standing just in the middle of the road, and why are all these little patches of waste just everywhere? And it's just because it's just a normal thing. In the Cayman Islands, there's chickens run everywhere. They're just chickens.
It reminds me of the Great Emu Wars in Australia. Did you hear the story already?
Never heard it.
There was a period of time where emus were just too rampant in Australia, and they basically wanted to get rid of them, and sort of hired the military to wage war against the emus.
Wow.
And the weird thing is, they lost. Because the emus are pretty tough motherfuckers, and you can't just kill them with one bullet. You have to kill them multiple times, and they only had a small squad with a limited amount of bullets. And they tried to drive around in their jeeps, and they missed them all the time. And they wage together, and they hide, and they got together in groups, and they just managed to kill a couple of hundreds of them, but never really extinct them. And so the emus officially won that war. The funny thing about it is, afterward they just made a bounty for heads of emus, and the problem ended in like a couple of months.
Wow, that's crazy. That's zombie emus. Yeah,
you gotta look this up. The Emu Wars. It's just the funniest story ever.
That's crazy.
I can't write shit like that. That's only reality can write such stories.
That's awesome. That's wow. I mean, could you just imagine, like, the emus used to be innocent, but now they get together and plot out plans, and they've got this long memory that we never knew about, and like, one day when we finally breed and have hands, we're gonna grab weapons. Just wait. Hey, kitty. Yes. All right.
Emu Wars second part. The Great Emu World War. Oh man.
The Emu War. Wow.
Oh, by the way, because we mentioned squirrels all the time, do you know there's an RPG based on squirrels?
No. Well,
it's called Squirrel Attack. Get Mr. Jones nuts. That's not a joke. It actually exists, and it's based on that you play a squirrel on a giant tree, and there are different tribes of squirrels, like flying squirrels and giant squirrels and shit like that, and you play actual squirrels.
See, there's an animated movie called Over the Hedge, and I always thought that would be really fun to do, like squirrels and chipmunks and raccoons and such, and you play them, and you have to like navigate through people's yards and their homes and get into the cabinets and refrigerators and such. And I always thought that would be like a really funny, cool type of setting where, not necessarily fighting against other squirrels. I don't like that because that would just be wrong.
And you don't fight against other squirrels. I think it's just that there are different tribes and different types of squirrels you can play. It's a bit of a fantasy game because this tree is like something huge and fantasy-like.
Mhm.
Also, there's a very interesting German-based game which is called simply Rats, or Ratten in German, where you play actual rats in an abandoned mall.
Oh, wow.
And it's basically based on the idea that the humans are not longer there. Maybe they're extinct, you don't know. And you play very intelligent rats, and you can play actually different types of rats, so laboratory rats or water rats and stuff like that, because the lower level is flooded completely. And it's a really interesting idea.
I like that idea. It's like I mean, sure, it's a little strange and gonzo, but the idea that there's a built-in kind of like limitation on what you can do, and then now you have to figure your way around it. I'm sure rats are super intelligent on their own. I mean, if left on their own devices, they could probably make their own industry in an abandoned, mall. But that being said, they're small. They have to navigate through tight spaces, and maybe they have to work together to lift up things.
Yeah, normal other animals become suddenly boss monsters. Fighting something like a pit bull would be really hard. It's really interesting, and they even made up different classes. So laboratory rats are pretty good at using human devices and pray to them like gods, because it's basically the flashlight is something that brings light to the darkness. And there's a rat which is super fat and is specialized on getting favors from other rats for food. And yeah, it's really interesting. I'm pretty sure there's an English version of that somewhere, and it's free in German, so I suppose it's in English too.
There's Tesla Ranger brings up the same thing I was about to say. Also, Mouse Guard. Mouse Guard is like the pseudo anthropomorphic mice, and you fight against cats and rats and things like that. Mouse Guard has a I don't own the game, but I know it has a
It's based on Torchbearer, as far as I know.
Yes, and it's got a like a narrative die mechanic, not related to Fantasy Flight games, but it's got like a challenge narrative system. I can't remember how it works.
I've listened to or watched one of the plays, but I'm not sure exactly how it worked anymore. By the way, we didn't even started to talk about the topic of today.
I know. Look, I just have to point something out because Rickard in the chat pulled out a quote and pasted it, and I love the line where it says, "The EMU Command had evidently ordered guerrilla tactics, and its unwieldy army soon split up into innumerable small units." The EMU Command, like there were. I get military jargon, but it's like assessing a sentient, organized effort by the emu to like not be attacked by the guns. It's just bizarre. It's like, yeah, they were actively fighting us, and it made our attacks useless. Oh man, yeah. I guess you have to do that instead of just being like, yeah, we were just idiots. It just didn't work the way we thought it would. Okay, so the main topic, of course, 15 minutes into the show, is that we were talking about travel and travel in RPGs, making travel interesting. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, we already talked about in many different ways about using the weather and using the environment, of course, changing our perceptions of using encounters rather than like just attacks. You can have encounters with villagers and encounters with travelers, and finding anything that's abandoned, or such. But I also feel that Rickard explains the quote. The quote's from an ornithologist, Dominic Severity, summarizing the calls. Yeah, it's. I don't want to. I guess you could say sometimes things taken out of context, or rather, looking at it in context, but from like many years later, some things are just very bizarre when you read them, and you're just like,
maybe this was a choice from him, a deliberate choice to make it sound like that, make it sound more interesting.
Yeah, that sounds like such a mid-level management kind of thing. Like, it wasn't our fault. It was because they were organized. It wasn't, it's not because we did anything wrong. It's because, we just didn't expect them to be, this organized EMU Command. It just seems like such a middle management. We need to displace the blame on the people that don't matter. Like, I don't know. I just.
But to just come back to traveling, because we mentioned the places you visit while traveling, I think when you want to make a travel plan and want to make things interesting for your characters, plan some interesting locations they can visit on the road.
Yeah.
Like roadside attractions, basically in real life, but for adventurers. So like ruins and specific taverns, and maybe some shops they could visit on the road. Maybe even what I sometimes did, make a random encounter table and include places in there.
Absolutely. One of the best things I think we all appreciate when traveling is we get to see things that we don't normally see at home. So, like you said, like roadside attractions, like someone, I don't know, you're traveling through the woods and a druid made a giant dragon that was grown from tree limbs that were just shaped, and it may not lead to anything. It could just be a big monument or something, and just finding out why it was there, finding a hot spring, finding things on the road. Maybe there's I'm sure this is done around the world, but here in the US, when there's a roadside accident, people will put make a small little honorific of different sorts. They'll put like a cross and flowers and teddy bears and things when there's an accident, when someone had passed away or died, or a violent action happened, and they'll make a little my brain is
a little shrine, more or less.
Yeah, and they're temporary, and who's to say that those things? I would absolutely say that those things would exist on a road if you're traveling. You're in a caravan or something. Yeah, you would see something.
This reminds me of. Did you see Batman Begins?
Yeah.
There was the scene where he traveled through, I think, Tibet or something, and there were this place where just spears or sticks were in the ground with flags on it, and it looks like a whole forest. And as far as I know, this is a place where there used to be a huge battle in the past, and they just made this monument out of these sticks and flags to mark this place. And it's a really interesting place because there's a big battle happened there. Maybe it's something you could investigate. Maybe there are still remnants of what happened before, and you can make stuff really interesting. What I did in a random encounter table for a desert was putting in shrines. At one point of this, I think I made a D20 table with different things. So combat encounter on 1 to 3 and places on 4 to 6 or whatever. And on 20, there was a shrine. And when they visited all 5 of these shrines, they get a special bonus. So basically, when they find one of these shrines, they could try to find the other 4, and then they could discover a secret and gain a stash of treasure.
Yeah, when you brought up something because that made me think of the fact that sometimes we as the game master get frustrated with travel because it's so easy for the players to get distracted. But you brought up the fact of like, hey, if they find all 5 of these shrines, they gain something. Maybe there's a piece of evidence, or there could literally be a piece of something, and if they find all 5 pieces, they can link them together. But I understand that, for example, let's take the desert, and the game master says, hey, I've got this great dungeon. They go down in this giant pyramid or a big giant sphinx, and if they open the door, they go into the dungeon. And the players could get distracted by things on their way, maybe distracted by the shrines and they don't want to go to the pyramid, or distracted by roving raiders or something like that, thinking that there's more. But I would say, like, don't be frustrated by that. The adventure is in front of the players. So if the players turn left, then just place the adventure in front of them. And
quantum adventure.
Right. And really, so I think some online for years and years and years, we've been talking, people want to know, well, how do I ad lib a game? How do I stop preparing so much? Or it's the combination, the split between preparing a lot, preparing a big giant world and writing down tons of notes and, tens and hundreds of pages versus off the cuff, ad lib. I don't have anything. Let's just start to play. And I think there's the problem is that both camps are right down the middle. And here's what I mean. Instead of saying, hey, I want the players to travel 200 miles and get to my pyramid, my dungeon. Instead, the people who are very equipped to handle when players turn left or right, instead, what they actually make up in their heads and write on paper or what have you are little micro adventures. And no matter where the players turn, they're always bumping up against a micro adventure. And so, for example, maybe there's a shrine. Let's say it has 3 rooms. Not much to it. Right? Okay, that's one little aspect of your world. And then let's say they're desert raiders. They're riding on the back of like the woolly mammoths or something from Star Wars. They're the Tusken Raiders. That might be another encounter. That's not a full adventure, but that's just another encounter. And if the players never see those things, the game master still has it in their head. Like, I could use this encounter later, maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, maybe a month from now, a year from now. So those game masters that maybe people out there see that are always prepared when things turn bad, it's not that they're just thinking of this off the cuff. They're probably thinking of something they created 5 months ago and went, you know what, I'm going to insert it right now. I didn't use it before, I'll use it right now. So
and again, you could just make a random encounter table and include those mini adventures in your encounter table.
Exactly.
Also, what I like to do when the players go too much off rail is offer them a simple way to get on the tracks again, which I usually use a ferryman for. So a supernatural ferryman, which brings them to where they are needed most. So when you get to a huge amount of water, there's a bell and some kind of container, and when you place a specific coin in there and ring the bell, every time a ferryman will show up out of fog, and it will bring them just to another place near the water where they are needed most. I stole this idea from Gargoyles, the old series, where they had this boat which just brought them every time to where they are needed most, and they ventured all through the world with this thing.
Gargoyles. That's a great show.
Oh yeah.
It was for a cartoon. It had so much world building in it. So much mature world building. more than it needed to be. I guess is a strange thing to say for an animated show. So yeah, I wish someone
Yeah,
could bring that back.
it's really interesting if you come back to it after all these years, because you just remember it being some cool adventure series, but later you watch it again and find out that they actually did some solid storytelling in there and had some cool ideas how to make the stories of mysticism versus technology and old versus new and legends and new legends that form, and it's really interesting. Really cool ideas in there. And this fog idea, just to bring them back into the adventure, basically. I love this idea, because you could even say you can only get to the dungeon through this ferryman. And this ferryman can basically teleport wherever he wants.
That's actually kind of cool, because you could translate the ferryman into any environment. Like, let's say there are mountain guides or something, and the mountain guides are like, they're like the druids of your world, and no one's been able to go through the mountain passes unless you have a mountain guide with you. So even if the mountain guide takes the players past something interesting, maybe they still need, how can I explain this? In order for them to progress forward, they need the mountain guide to get them through it. Otherwise, they just remain where they are. And so that could be a very good way of, these mute mountain guides. They seem like old decrepit people, but for some reason they just happen to know their way through these like treacherous mountain valleys and such. And oftentimes the people who don't pay the guides just get lost. They just keep walking in circles. They can just never escape. And so the PCs,
maybe you have to have some kind of mini adventure to gain their trust or gain the favor of bringing you through the mountains. So you could make little adventures. With my ferryman, I usually make it like that they only accept specific coins, and to get these specific coins is basically like a small adventure every time.
Yeah, I just have to say, just this is a side note. I know, I know Rickard was being very funny, and I just have to say, I guarantee next week when we start to blow off steam, I guarantee he's going to have so many one-liners. So I've just noticed.
Loots are us is just awesome.
Don't, but believe me, I saw it in the chat. It's just. Loots are us. Whatever, man. That's awesome.
By the way, Deadman, could you share a link to the Boggles RPG? I'm really interested in this.
Yeah, and you may not be able to. Oh, the chat may not. Either send it to the Discord or give us a way to Google it or something, because I think the chat prevents you from putting in actual links.
Yeah, you can get around it, but it's pretty hard. You have to make in caps. There are some tricks, but it's hard.
Yeah, but yeah, if you could find that, Game Breakers Media, which I've never seen Game Breaker before. Hey, what's going on? Says that's a great way to frame improv GMing. Yeah, there was, oh man, this was years ago, but in the One Shot Facebook group, one time we got into a discussion about improv GMing versus prep GMing, and I made the point of telling. Some people were like, yeah, anyway, it had to do with Matt Click and Fistful of Dice, and we were all talking, and this is before they got as large as they were, and I said to them, I was like, well, Matt's not improving. I said he's always prepared. It's just not written down in one place. I said I would guarantee you that an improv GM just has a number of their ideas they've just never used, and they just pull one out of their pocket. And it seems like they're coming across like they're just making it up off the top of their head. But I would guarantee that their experiences in role playing meant that they brought up a trap or an encounter or an NPC or what have you, just reflavored a little bit that they've just never used before.
Yeah. It's usually the case, because it's really hard to come up with something flavorful and interesting on the fly. It can happen, but it's super rare. Usually you thought about the idea for what you're using way beforehand, maybe even just unconsciously. for some time, and then you had it basically in your back pocket to pull out whenever you need it. That's how you improv basically the jam. That's basically the reason why improving gets way easier the more experience you have, and the more other DMs you watched, and the more adventures you read, and because you have this library of encounters and enemies and traps and stuff in your head, and can pull it out whenever you need it. That's why improv is so hard for a new BGM, because you don't have this library yet. You have to basically build up your library over time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's where some improv comedians and even actors are, some of them are exceptional. And I think you're right. They have this library of reactions to things. And if their library, I think the skill is just having a very large library and being able to pick through that library very quickly. But many of those very improv comedians are very good at that. They have hundreds of responses, and they're able to pick and choose which ones they want. And then they're also adding more to their little their library, their massive amount of responses and such. And I think it just comes across very naturally to them, or what we see as natural to them. They are going back through the Rolodex and going, oh, I'm going to pick this out as a response.
That's the real skill here, because when you have a specific situation, having the real interesting stuff to pull out of your head at a specific moment can be really hard. But when you pick it off, then it's usually amazing. When you find the exact right thing to do and say in this specific moment, because you have such a vast library.
Yeah. Just to let everybody know, I see everything in the chat, so it's not that I'm ignoring you or anything. But I just wanted to bring up, Azala brings up a really great idea. She had an idea earlier that for the last 20 minutes or so of every stream, to post a link to allow everyone to come on and discuss. I think there's a limit of 8 people at one time. I actually thought of that at one point. I am not afraid of doing things that are like gonzo and strange and bizarre. So I'm going to absolutely take that under advisement. Like, I think that's actually a great idea to do, to allow people to jump into a live show and such. Balancing it might be kind of strange in the beginning, but I will absolutely take that advice. I think that's a great idea. And Greenbaker's Media says he doesn't, or they, he or she or they don't usually hit the live show. So yeah, I get it.
Game Breakers also told that it's a good idea to have a cliffhanger and then flash it out for next week, which is a thing I do all the time. It's a bit cheap. It's a bit of a cheap trick, but sometimes you have to just delay a session until you come up with a good idea for what to do next. So you basically insert some small thing, or maybe make the trip a bit longer and make something suspenseful at the end, and then you have basically a week or whatever time to come up with what to do next, and use this time. It's really important to look what the characters have done and what you could do next. I'm one of these guys who is like, I want to have the players to be able to do anything they want, and I want the world to react to it. So when the players do something really important, just think about who would react to what the players did, what would the world do to progress in the meantime. Don't just use up the space and just think, oh, I've prepared whatever already, I don't have to do anything anymore. Try to think about these things between sessions, and then you basically come up as a genius. I made this once where one of the characters ended with they were transported like 1,000 years into the past, and then I just made up some quick scenes they made in the past, and then I had until the next session to come up with this past world and what they could do in there.
You brought up a really great idea, and something that I've been thinking about doing a specific video about, but I'll bring it up now because why the hell not? There are people who prep a lot, and I believe sometimes the wordings that they use when trying to prep is not incorrect, but takes them down the wrong path. So let me explain. Sometimes you'll see online, whether it's YouTube or Facebook or any of the social media, where someone will say, well, I prep to account for a number of decisions I think my players are going to make. And my feeling is that leads to too many problems. I think instead, what you mentioned is prepping the world. Don't prep for what someone else is going to do. Prep for what your world, how your world will react to anything. Let me give you an example. Something very simple. The players come to a town. They come to a town and it's got like a walled city, and they have to get into the castle. There's people there, they're travelers and such, and the PCs need to get into the castle. Okay, so they have to pay a toll to get through the gate, or they could sneak over the walls, or they could like bribe the gate master to let them come in with their weapons or whatnot. Now, I believe the mistake would be, I'm going to prep my world, this little town that's got a big wall around it, like a fort, to what the players are going to do. Because what's going to happen is invariably they're going to do something you're not prepared for. But if you prep the town, hey, the captain of the guard is super suspicious of everything, and is hard-nosed and doesn't allow any of his guardsmen to let their guard down, and is not very well liked. If you just prepare that individual, or maybe you prepare there's a guard who is taking bribe money to allow the local thieves guild to sneak into the gates, right? Then when the players do something in your world, all you have to do is react to what they're doing. Let's say the captain of the guard is very suspicious. The captain of the guard has quote unquote higher perception and starts walking the walls and inspecting things. Maybe there's a guard, one of the players wants to bribe one of the guards. And, one guard's like, what are you trying to do? Bribe me? And then maybe the other guard sneaks in and goes, I'll handle it. And holds out their palm like, sure, I'll take the coins instead. So in other words, instead of preparing for what players do, just prep the world. Prep your NPCs. How would the world react if you have a dragon? Just come up with a motivation for the dragon. Don't come up with how the dragon would react to the players. Just say the dragon wants to hold the mistress for themselves and find a spell to turn into a human being or something, right? And leave it at that. And then when the players react to them, if let's say one of the players casts a spell that allows them to shape change, now well, wait a minute, the dragon might want to bargain with them to learn that spell. Hey, if the human can change into a T-Rex, maybe I can. A T-Rex is kind of like a dragon. Maybe you can do the opposite. I'll parlay with them, and I think that's where the mistakes come in. Don't try to prep for players. Just prep your world.
Yeah. What I would add to that, don't take your players into account. That's basically a great idea at first. And then when they come in, take into account what they already did. So prep for the past, not for the future. And if you want to prep for the future, don't include the PCs. So basically you have, what I like to do is having a timeline of things that will happen if the PCs do nothing. So, for example, in this town, maybe after 1 week, the dragon is just fed up and doesn't want to wait anymore and attacks the castle and tries to steal some scrolls from the wizard living there. If the PCs do nothing, don't interact with the dragon, or don't get into the castle by now, the dragon will attack at this point. If they do something to interfere, you have to take this in account and change your plan accordingly. But you have always something to backdrop. If the PCs do nothing or do something completely different, you have something that could happen, something exciting, and they also have something to do because they have to prevent certain things or maybe use certain things to their advantage. Maybe they could get into the castle while the dragon attacks. The dragon makes an entrance for them. Things like that. that's what I like to do. I stole this idea from an old adventure I used to run. And it's really, really good advice, in my opinion. Having things like that. Also, what you could do is having escalation levels. So if you mess up with a specific faction too much, they will do this. If you keep messing with them, they will do that. Just so, for example, if you mess with the thief guilds a bit, they will try to steal stuff from you. And later, if you mess a little more with them, they will get maybe hire some murders to kill you. And at the last step, they will use a wide attack and ambush with all of their members to get rid of you.
Yeah. Game Breakers Media says, if you know what happens if the PCs weren't there, you also have something to draw from when somebody breaks out the divination. That's, you know what, we're not going to go down that rabbit hole, but that is a subject amongst itself. One of the top three things that just I won't say ruin, although most people will use that word, but one of the top three player abilities that drives GMs crazy, and that's any super senses, anything that allows PCs to gain information that their humanoid bodies would not allow them to. Seeing the future, seeing through walls, any type of astral projection, being able to hear and see things from very far distances in the future, all those, any kind of super sense, mind reading, telepathy, just like, it drives GMs crazy. And of course, the other two are flight and teleportation.
Yeah, the big question is, why does it drive GMs crazy? And I think the main reason is because they have fixed events in mind they want to do no matter what the PCs do. And that's the problem, because when the PCs find out, oh, the big bad evil guy tries to summon a demon at this specific place at this specific time, they will maybe manage to prevent this from happening, and then the campaign can't continue at this specific point. Instead, don't plan for him to finish this thing. Maybe make it as a future event they could prevent, and then think about what would happen if it doesn't happen. Maybe the big bad evil guy gets more desperate and tries something more risky to summon the demon. And you can always find a way to progress your story, even if the PCs do nothing. The specific adventure I stole this from had an event where a cove of witches would be in conflict with an inquisitor, and this adventure specifically called for, when the PCs do nothing at this specific day, the witches will summon a huge fucking demon and destroy the whole town. That's it. And if they don't prevent it, then the adventure is over at the specific point, and your PCs have lost.
Yep. Or you change your world. Now there's big fucking demon rampaging around, and that's the world now. I mean, why not let it happen? I always say, like, you're never going to run out of things. Azala brings up, like, last time I GM'd a one shot, the players ended up so far off the rails that I had absolutely no idea what to do. Improv is not my strong point. I would those who are not used to improving, I will argue with you and say that you're probably better than you think you are. I would say you're absolutely better than you think you are. I believe what happens is it's the idea of going out to dinner, right? You go out to dinner with friends. In your mind, you say, hey, I want to eat at this particular place or have this meal. But when you're with other people, the greater number of people, the smaller chance you're going to get to eat what you want, right? So you could either dig in your heels and say, no, I want the Chinese food and everyone else wants pizza or something, right? You could dig in your heels and be annoying, or you could just never attach yourself to that idea, right? There's 4 of us. That means there's only 25% chance I get to eat what I want. How about I just let that go and do whatever the 75% wants to do? You know what I mean? And in many ways, that's adventuring, right? Hey, I want them to visit my desert pyramid. but the other 3 players want to go to the oasis. So for me as a game master, well, okay, then the desert pyramid, forget that part. Let's just go to the oasis. Now I may not have, again, maybe I didn't create something for the oasis, but what I would end up doing is go through my mental Rolodex and go, hey, I had this encounter that I wanted to do in an oasis. Maybe I'll link 3 different things together, and then that's going to be the new adventure. And then I can always go back on the rails. Maybe they meet someone at the oasis that says something or gives some kind of clue to go back to the 12-page adventure I wrote about the
that's
pyramid.
what I wanted to mention. When I write adventures or campaigns, I usually have something I call anchors. So this is something usually linked to the character's interests or background, which will bring them back on path when they deviate too wide from it. Maybe there's an NPC who suddenly needs help and you can only solve it by going back to the adventure. Or they find out, hey, there's this cool item that I can only obtain when I go back on the adventure. Or simply a lot of people who tell them, hey, there's good, you get paid a lot of money when you go to this specific person who wants you to get back on the adventure. And these things can really help if you have no idea what to do when your characters go too wide off rail, and you can basically insert them wherever. And when they go out of town and you really need them to be in town, have their merchant being robbed, and then the merchant is on the way back onto town, and he will give them their bounty when they get back, their loot. What is it called? Some money you give someone when you're thankful to them.
Oh, like a
reward.
Like a reward.
That's what it was. Sometimes some words are just gone from me. Sometimes when you're bilingual, it's so weird.
Hey, every day I do these live streams, I do that about 15 times.
Yeah. Thanks, Richard.
Yeah. In the chat, I've got to read through these because I think all of them are absolutely appropriate and make perfect sense. Rickard says, I think part of it is that DMs feel they need to come up with something on the fly when it's starting to move away from me. When they can say, cool, give me 5 minutes to think about what happened. So let's take a drink break and then continue. And then Deadman says to Azala, just rearrange the dungeon to set them back on track.
Just 1 second. There seems to be a troll in the chat.
Oh yeah, it's one of those bots or something. Yeah, oh man. And sometimes if you start to like try to block them, I'm not sure if it starts to change up. I can there we go. I can try to hide them, but there we go. So yeah,
I block him for me.
And I blocked him. I'm the moderator, so that there we go. They were deleted, but it might come back. I've seen those bots flip who post the messages before. So yeah, I've seen that. Azala says the players said they had fun, so that's all that really matters. But I was just completely lost doing it. Okay, this is a universal amongst every single GM, no matter how long they've played. Your players will have the time of their life, and you will be banging your head against the wall like, oh, I screwed up. It's a universal. You'll never think you're never going to think you are as good as you think you are. That's just it's just us wanting to be perfect. Imagine writers trying to write a television episode or a movie in one pass. It never happens. It would never happen, right? Your adventure is going to only be as good as it is once. And if the players have fun, honestly, that's called a success, right? Of course, in your head and your heart, you're like heart's beating because you're like, oh man, I know what I'm going to do, and your head's thinking, oh, I should have done this other thing in hindsight, but nah, I guarantee your players are going to have fun. But one thing that Rickard brings up where he says, cool, give you 5 minutes to think about it.
Oh, sorry, there's someone on the door. Be right back.
All right, no problem. If you have a good synergy, if your players have a good synergy with the GM or you as a GM, that 5-minute break could just be you, the players talking amongst each other, role playing amongst each other. And if you've ever seen really good live plays, you'll see the dungeon master kind of sitting back, letting them role play, because while they're listening in on what the players are talking about, they're coming up with a new encounter. They're coming up with, oh man, the plans are changed. I need time to think about it. And as a good player, don't sit there and like fold your arms and wait for the game master to come up with something new. What you do is instead you give time for the game master to come up with something new by you interacting with the other players. You know, you're the barbarian who asked the wizard to teach them how to read, and you're the rogue who gets into a philosophical argument about assassinating people versus, you know, having honor with the paladin or something, and just come up with these kind of like interactions with amongst the other player characters. And then that gives your game master time to think about what they want to do. You know, and this isn't for you as in chat, I'm talking about anyone that sees this. Like, don't be the a-hole who tries to point out the story weaknesses. It's your job to ensure that everybody has fun, including the game master. And if that just means, hey, I'm just going to role play with the other players to give the game master time to like flip through a book or come up with an idea or take a bathroom break or take a drink or something, fine, then do it. And then you get back into it. Yeah.
As an addition, it is usually not a shame to give the GM ideas of how he could react to some problems in his story. I had this once in my Shadowrun game where we basically had to force two politicians to sign a contract. And my player character was like, okay, if we force them to sign the contract, we could just forge it and would basically be the same thing. And he was like, oh, I didn't thought of that. And then I had to then I was the person who came up with, okay, maybe just signing the contract will give us enough time to act, and they had to go through some kind of process to negate it again, and they have to use their own DNA to sign it or whatever. We can't just forge this. And that's completely legit. You can find a way for your GM to make something happen because you know the intent of him. He wants us to do this run, to sign this contract. So find a way. We have to do that.
Right. Yeah, exactly. You could just like think out loud and then let your game master hear the thoughts out loud, and that gives them a lot of like story threads to pull on, kind of. So you know, if I just make an example, the players come to the castle and they're thinking of ways to go inside. When you role play amongst yourselves, you can also talk out loud about doing it. Like one person says, hey, why don't we bribe a guard? And someone else may say, well, this is a pretty, you know, lawful, you know, rules heavy kind of city. I don't know if bribing the guards is a smart idea. Maybe we can sneak over the walls. Or someone can say, you know, we could time out where the guards travel and try to time it out that way. And someone else can say, well, I'm a noble. I can just, you know, show my, you know, my noble medallion or something like that, and maybe that'll give us passage into the town. And then maybe another player says, yeah, but the royals will know, the other noble family here will know you've come here. They're going to want to know why you're here, and talk out loud about all of those ideas, because one of those will spark the GM to take one of those ideas, maybe exactly as you said, or maybe flip it a little bit.
You would be surprised how many ideas GMs get just from players discussing the situation they are in, especially in games where you plan a lot, like Shadowrun, where you plan different plans to entrance, and then what could go wrong? Okay, there could be that, and the GM is like taking notes all the time.
Exactly. And of course in the chat, Rickard says I'm thinking more of a, you know, quote, players casting a divination spell and it caught the DM off guard. I absolutely get what you're saying. Like if someone were to ask me, I'm using X-ray vision. What are they doing in the other side of the room? And I'm going, I wasn't expecting someone to use, X-ray vision while the guards are talking or something, and I do get that. And hey, baby, love you. I do get the fact that like sometimes you can be thrown off guard by that. And, as a player, like, of course, give the GM time to think about it. We remember there's one person versus 3 to 8 other people. We all know that the collective mass of brain power of like 3 to 8 other people is going to be greater than one person. So give the GM a time to at least come up with the story and whatnot, and don't like point out the fact that, oh, you just made that up on the spot. Well, of course, because everyone else made it up on the spot too. That's the whole point of role playing, right? Whether it's made up 30 seconds from now or 3 weeks from this point, to me, it's canon, right? It's in the game.
As long as it is believable and it works inside the world and it makes sense, sure, do it. There are just sometimes the situations where the GM just pulls out bullshit, basically. Like suddenly there's a guard where there shouldn't be one, for example, or you just looked up the place completely, but suddenly there's a room that shouldn't be there and somehow you missed it or whatever, and it just doesn't make sense in the world, but you just do it because you don't know what else to do. That's a bit cheap. But having something that makes sense, for example, the players want to dig a tunnel to get inside the castle, and it is established that there are whatever dire moles or whatever in this region. Maybe let them attack by dire moles, because it totally makes sense that they might attack someone who digs a tunnel.
Yep. Hey, Scott Poe says exactly what you said. Like, when a player warns the party of a potential danger, be a sport and make them look clever by adding that danger. Hell yeah, I've used that plenty of times. Players are like in Shadowrun. Well, we used to play Cyberpunk, but one of the players would say something like, "Hey, we've got to make these plans and get moving because, I don't know, this corporation is down our throats and they're going to attack." And in my mind, I'm thinking, I didn't think of that. But yeah, you see 3 vehicles show up and armed guards jump out of the vehicles to come after, into the abandoned building. Like, when in doubt, if they say it, go ahead and add it in there. Go ahead and let them do that. And if it makes them look good, makes them look cool, whatever. So what, they kill 25 nameless, goons that you threw at them because they mentioned it and you hadn't thought about it. Whatever. You're not going to run out of. That's one thing I always say. You're not going to run out of bad guys. There's no upper limit to you opening up a book and throwing monsters or spaceships or something at them. Throw things at them. Let them look cool. As a matter of fact, this might even give you time to think about what's going on. The players are being attacked by something. They're wondering, okay, who's coming after us? Is it another faction? Does the enemy know it or something? And maybe you had zero idea. You just said, I'm going to throw this. They're being attacked in their abandoned warehouse or something, and you don't even know why they're being attacked. And then as your players start to talk amongst themselves, as they come up with all the conspiracy theories, you grab one, pull that string, put it in your back pocket, and go, sure. And then at the end of the game, you end it with a cliffhanger, right? Got to end it with a cliffhanger. And they go, well, who sent the goons after us? And you go, well, I don't. Let's wait till next week.
Oh, man. Tesla Ranger just pointed something out I want to mention in this regard also. Player, but what if there's other player? Shut up! I must admit, sometimes I think like that too. Don't give the GM too many bad ideas. Sometimes it's true, especially if you want to say something really bad might happen. Just shut up.
Yep.
But on the other hand, adding drama to the story is usually a good thing.
Yes.
If it wouldn't end in a TPK, just why not?
Absolutely. Although players, you know what, as much as we like to blame players for wanting to get over, some of them have are far more devious and dark than even the game masters. I remember one player, we were playing like Cyberpunk or something, and the player was like, "Well, wouldn't it just be easier for the bad guys to just poison all of our food?" And we all just put our heads down, like, "Oh my god, oh no, 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 no! He didn't just say." And I was like, "Oh, please don't!" And of course, I was game mastering at the time, and we all just like face palmed, and they're going, "Dude, why did you say that?" Like, he's like, "Well, we're loaded with guns and cybernetics and stuff. Wouldn't it just be easier to just take us out by poisoning all the food? They could just knock us out and do what they want." And the whole table just went silent, like, "Oh man," because they were fully expecting me to go, "Yeah, make a roll because you're about to pass out," because but players are notorious for coming up with like the most devious, backhanded,
but you can still include the stuff if you don't just do it immediately. You could maybe say, okay, maybe later someone gets the idea when the players already know this is a possibility because someone suggested it, so they are maybe a little bit more vigilant with their food already. It may be interesting just to give them something for this idea and maybe add a bit of tension, but having the players just rolling constitution saves while they're eating would be really nasty.
Oh wow. Yeah, it sure would. And imagine ending the game there. Roll your constitution and you failed. Okay, close the book. Time to go. All right, guys, game's over.
And you see the GM smile. Oh yeah. I really want a shirt with "Never Trust a Smiling Game Master."
Just guys in the chat and Vince, just think. I'm because we've already passed the hour mark, so great time to bring this up. Azala brings up the point of having people jump into the end of the chat so that it could be a bunch of us or something, like a collective or whatever. I can't post, if I were to do that, I cannot post the link into the chat. So what I'm thinking
in Discord.
Absolutely. What I'm thinking is you have to be a member of the Discord. I just very, very easily bring up the Discord, throw the link into the chat towards the end, and then everyone can jump in if they wish. So if you guys are prepared with your microphones and or cameras, just let me know if you think that's a great idea, because I think that's a great idea to be able to use the Discord, because that's what it's for. And unfortunately, I'm not able to like interact with the Discord the way I want to. So this is a great way for me to do that and whatnot. So yeah, that's an idea. So of course, as always, we tend to go off the rails a little bit, but I think that's kind of
I think we talked about a lot of interesting and useful stuff today, so I don't actually mind at all, because improvising and things like these are super essential to being a GM and being a player, to know what your GM has to do all the talking time, and maybe helping him with them by giving him ideas and things. That it can be super valuable, and I think it's maybe even more important than knowing how to do travel. It's more basic, more essential. So
exactly. Like Prue Prue says, sounds like fun, might jump in every once in a while, and maybe this will be the chat is a poor way to express yourselves, because I know many of you are like, I only have a few words, I've got this big idea and I can only type in a few things at a time.
I got this problem all the time.
Yes. So maybe this is a way for us to get the context across. So I thank you, Azala. I think that's a great idea. Will I do it tomorrow? Maybe not. You know what? I think we're already going to go off the rails next week. So I think next week is a perfect time. That way you guys can express anything and everything, all your hates, all the stresses.
Remind DBJ of this in like the 45-minute mark at the latest.
Yes, because I'll go off on my own. So I'll do my little squirrel thing. So yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great idea. I think, yeah, as Alice says, could start next week. Give DBJ and everyone else time to set up for it. Yep, and we can all scream at things.
It's not 200 word limit, Alex. It's 200 characters limit. That's the problem. If it would be 200 words, I would be super happy.
Yeah, Deadman says, especially for the blow off Steam week. Absolutely. I mean, we can bring up all kinds of things like problem
players and stupid adventures and
oh man,
tropes and whatever.
Everything. You know what? There's a little I think one of the worst pet peeves, and I know this doesn't happen at all, very often at all. But this pissed me off when I was a very young kid, and I don't know how often it happens. But you're a new player, and a veteran player keeps reaching across the table, touching your character sheet, turning it around, and telling you what to do. Oh my God! Oh, ooh, that's like it's like don't touch it. Don't you even.
That's super rude.
Yeah, it's like, don't tell me what to do. Like,
but they always. Have you played Pandemic?
No.
This is a game where you have to cooperate between all the players, and basically you can suggest moves to other players. And there's basically like a specific type of Pandemic player who basically wants to play the game alone. But so he just suggests the moves to all players and will only accept his moves. And this reminds me very much of this.
You know what? I can see this. I'll say it. I can see a lot of like tables that aren't used to like a lot of female gamers. You always got there's that one guy who's like, let me tell you how it's done. Let me show you. You know, like Azala says, touches someone else's dice and their character sheets and whatnot. It's like, dude.
You have to do a session about superstitions of role players. This is so fucking huge.
Oh, hell yeah.
There are these people who like, I want to use my good dice, and if the dice doesn't work, they destroy the dice and shit like that. It's super stupid.
Oh, there's some funny ass videos out there about people putting their dice on punishment, putting them in jail, microwaving them, setting
shaming. I rolled 3 times a 1 when doing the death saves or shit like that. So I killed my player's PC, and yeah.
Oh wow, yeah. Oh man, exactly.
It's weird how many superstitions come up with dice for role players. It's so. I had a couple of players who were actually pretty nasty when it came to these things. They would never lend you a dice because it's theirs and it's the good dice, and you should not be able to use it. And oh man, all the players who really don't dislike a specific type of dice, who like, I never use D10s because they always roll bad for me or shit like that. I don't like D10 systems or D100 systems.
Yep. Oh man, Azala says my uncle tried to grab something off. He said my mom was that way. My uncle tried to grab something off her plate while eating, and she pinned his hand to the table with a fork. Hell yes. Hey, if I order something, that food is mine. You better ask first. Do not reach. Oh man.
Oh man. Scott means that's why co-op games need a trader mechanic. Absolutely.
Yep, absolutely. So yeah, we're gonna have some fun. Be aware that the thumbnails are coming up with are absolutely positively clickbaity. That's not my norm, but they will be. You'll probably see.
If I don't know the concept totally.
Yeah, it'll be like cats and boobs and it'll say things like
yep,
the word
and
exactly
red text.
Yep, red text and the best and worst and the things that suck or
top 10. Very funny.
Exactly. It's going to be
blow your mind.
Oh my god. Oh, this is going to be so fun. Oh shit. I'm sorry guys. I mean, we did have a point for this week, but I have to say, like, my expectations for all you guys is just giving me the idea is that this wouldn't even happen if it wasn't for you guys. So thanks a lot, and especially you, Vince, and everybody that's part of it. Of course, tomorrow is Future Friday, so we get to bring in all of our. Of course, we're going to talk sci-fi. Got to talk sci-fi and travel and science fiction games.
Traveler.
Always, hell yeah,
it's called that way for a reason.
Yep. Hell, we'll even talk about space travel, like oh, gotta use going sexual somewhere. Use word salacious in the title. Oh man, I gotta write this down. Sexual.
Oh, with a kitty cam. You have to do a kitty cam somewhere.
Oh, that's right, a kitty cam. Yeah, I'm sorry, I am writing this down. I mean, for real. But the idea of like different types of star drives, I think is kind of a cool thing.
Oh, I included this shit in Astrositas because I liked his idea.
Me too. Yeah, man, everything from like there was one game. Shit, it was based on the spinning of the star drives were based on the spinning of the galaxy, so you could travel away from where you were at the galactic center, not center, but where the where society
you can basically negate your movement related to the galaxy. So you would basically travel, you would just stay at your point while the galaxy travels away from you.
Exactly. So
that's a cool idea. Yeah,
it was a one-way trip. So you could leave faster than you could get back. So it was this is a weird thing to say, but it was an excuse to put the players where they wanted to go, but they couldn't get back home to get resources. So, like you said, they could stop their motion in relation to the movement of the galaxy, and it was almost like this instant transportation because, of course, the galaxy is spinning, hundreds, thousands, millions, trillions of times faster if you were to stay still while it spins, and then you would arrive at your location. But to go back took, weeks, months, years to get back.
Oh, and they made this with Kitty Pryde, Shadow, I think. It's called. It is this phasing X-Men character.
Yeah.
And she could basically teleport because she could make herself stand still in relation to the Earth. So she basically got translucent, and then she just get loosened again when she got into the place where she wanted to go. So she could only teleport in a specific direction.
Mm-hmm.
But it would be really fast and really far.
They did that with Guardian from Canadian Super Team, Alpha Flight. The original male, and they might have done it later, but the original male Guardian in the very first episodes, at first issues of Alpha Flight, he had he had like the maple leaf across his outfit, and he had the electromagnetic, suit, and he could teleport that way. He would fly up into the atmosphere and stop his movement in relation to the spinning of the Earth, so it looked like teleportation in one direction, right? He would just stay still, and the Earth would just keep spinning past him, so it looked like he would just blink out of existence, and you would just hear this like sonic boom, but really he was just standing still and the Earth was just spinning. I like those pseudo explanation kind of things.
They made an episode for I think it's called Because Science, where they explained why teleportation would actually suck as a superpower if you only had teleportation, because when you teleport up or down on the from the equator, because the spinning of the Earth would be different, so you would have a different speed than the place you arrive in. That's shit you never think about.
Yeah, I mean, technically, either you or the place you're going would be carrying momentum.
Yeah.
So if you teleport into another building and you're so-called standing still, the Earth is still moving, you would just slam against a wall, right? Splat.
Oh yeah.
You know what? The same can be said for time travel. If you are in a
time
single
travel would be super complicated. You would have to you have to calculate the specific position the Earth was at this specific time. Holy shit, would that be complicated?
So yeah, you go back in time and you end up in Alpha Centauri. Good luck.
You would also need to have the ability to teleport like light years away.
Yes, because the Earth is spinning on our galaxy's axis.
Yeah.
So not only is the Earth spinning and the other planets spinning and the other planetary systems spinning, the actual entire galaxy is moving when you go through time and space. So you could end up hundreds of thousands of light years away from where you really want it to be, just by going back to like the prehistoric age or something. I mean,
Yeah, maybe it's not that drastic, but maybe a light year if you go to 1,000 of years, that would be possible.
True. You could. Oh wow.
Yeah, that shit is complicated. You always just assume that the power just take care of all this shit, but if you don't assume that, it gets really interesting suddenly.
Yep, that's absolutely correct. Absolutely, that's crazy. Oh man, yeah. Maybe we shouldn't create time travel. Maybe. Maybe we should just leave that alone. Oh man, Ozala says I'm going to travel
enough without these problems.
Exactly. So yeah, we're going to bring that's great. Hell, we've already got our subject for tomorrow. So yeah, we're going to bring that up. Bring up all kinds of things, whether like transporters and teleportation circles and traveling through places, and how we can not control it, but keep the PCs focused on one planet and keep them from like jumping to another planet, which is a complication in and of itself. So yeah, we'll do all that. So guys, absolutely going to add like an hour and a half or something, which I normally do. So everyone, thank you very much. Vince, please take us out and then we can end the stream.
Hello, and thank you for coming. Thank you for watching. Thank you for contributing in the chat. Until tomorrow, have fun and good gaming.
Awesome.